Hey everybody, welcome back. We're on day 3 of converting my Prusa MK4S printer over to the new CoreXY. Yesterday, we didn't do a whole lot. I didn't have a lot of time. Today, I'm hoping to have more time, so let's just get straight into it. I've got the instructions over there on the side. First up, we've got the Heatbed, and then hopefully, if we have time, we're gonna move on also to the CoreXY Gantry as well. So I've got all the parts prepared, and we're just gonna get started. And it looks like the first thing they want us to do is attach these power cables onto the heated bed. We're supposed to use the end that doesn't have the little QR code tag on it. So we're going to do that here. This one is marked ground, the one to my left here. So that's going to be for the black wire. And all we got to do is grab one of these and a washer from the top, and then we're going to use one of these lock nuts on the underside. So just like so, I'll get these started, both of them, just to hold them in place, and then we will lock it all down. I don't think I've mentioned it yet in this build, but for the most part, I'm trying to use just the tools that were provided with the kit itself. Prusa usually does a pretty good job of providing you with some decent tools to work with. All right, up next we have the cable cover, which comes in 2 parts. I think this one here is the bottom, this one's the top. So this is going to go up underneath there. But first there are some hex nuts that we have to press in place. And then I assume these are going to kind of come out like this, but not yet. For now, we're supposed to set this off to the side, and I think we'll get back to it later when we go to actually install it onto this metal piece, which we're going to work on next. So this is our carriage that's going to hold the heated bed. We're going to set it this way on the desk, and we're going to install these expansion joints, which we took off of the old printer. Then it wants me to grab one of the wrenches, trying to figure out which one. This one here, which has a cutout that's perfectly sized for these guys, and it wants me to orient them a specific way as I tighten them down. So these ones on the corners get angled with the wrench angled toward the middle, and these ones on the sides are just angled straight in like that. All right, up next, it looks like there are LEDs, or an LED strip that goes on the underside of the heated bed here. That's cool. I guess they probably use it for like status, print status and that sort of thing. So here's our LED strip. We need to peel off the backing for the adhesive. And then they want us to stick this down here, making sure that the cable coming off of it is to my right. Then we have a diffuser, which is going to go on here. And then a cover, which is a piece of acrylic. And it's got these, backing pieces that have to pull off. So I'll remove those. It says in the instructions that one side of this is matte. That looks like the side I just uncovered. The other side is gloss. And we're supposed to put this over the top of this LED diffuser with the gloss side down, matte side up, facing toward me. So that'll be basically like this. And then these 2 screws hold this down. I was wondering as I was screwing this down why that didn't seem like it was gonna work right. It's because there are these two little spacers that I forgot about. Here they are. And they go on top of these holes, right? So that way they provide the correct amount of spacing so you can actually tighten these things down, because otherwise it wasn't going to end up level. So let me back out these screws, put the spacers on, and then we should be good to go. All right, so now they want us to take 3 zip ties, put them through these little slots here, and we're going to use that, I think, to route this cable back and tie it down. Yes, and then they want me to run this cable back, just straight back this way, and tighten it down. Okay, we're done with that for the moment, but I don't think for very long. I think we're going to use it again pretty soon here. But up next, they want me to re-lubricate these 2 bearings that we took off of the old printer. And they did provide this tube of grease. And I printed this piece here. This was actually the very last thing that ever was printed on the Mark 4S before I disassembled it the other day. So the idea, I think, is that we're supposed to screw this nozzle tool onto here, insert it into here. I guess make sure the insides of these bearings are clean. They should be. I ran them over the rods as part of the disassembly process to make sure that they were sliding well. And I don't know that they need more lubrication, but we'll give them a little bit. And now that we've got those lubricated, we can put them into these parts. So these, I gotta say, are some of the coolest 3D printed parts I've seen in a while. I don't know, I just like the geometry on these things, and the overall finish on these prints is really, really good. Anyway, that's not the point, I guess. The point is we slide these down over the top of the bearing and we press it a little bit. It says it should snap into place, assuming that we apply the proper amount of pressure, I guess. There it went. That was kind of loud. You probably heard it on the video. It actually does require, at least for me, quite a bit of pressure here. That one, not quite so much. Now that I've got those in there, I will go ahead and remove this paper towel. All right, and then we're supposed to put these 2 hex nuts. They just press in right there. And then we use an M3x10, which is this screw here, through that way to tighten this down and seat the bearing into place. All right, then on the underside of these, there are 4 hexagonal places here where we need to put these hex lock nuts into place. All right, we're back. I got all those nuts pulled into place, and there was also this one additional piece here that they asked me to put 2 of the nuts down into as well. But now that that is done, we can flip this over this way, it looks like, and then grab this piece, and it's going to seat right in there like that, with 2 of these M3x10 screws. And then the other one, I imagine, goes on the other side, and it does. So just like that. And now it wants us to go ahead and put the heated bed, which I still have sitting here off to the side, onto this whole assembly here. So it's going to line up just like that over those spacers we put on earlier, these heat expansion things. This one spacer here goes in the middle. We use our longest screw, and then we've got these shorter ones to go around the outside edge. So the long one goes down through the middle. I just realized that when I placed the new thermistor, I didn't cut a hole there through that Kapton tape. So I'm covering this hole for the middle screw hole. So we'll just poke that real quick here. And the way I like to do this, I did this with the older printer as well, is to just make sure you get the center one lined up first, because that spacer likes to get away otherwise. So I'm just going to get my face down right here next to the piece as I place it down here, and we'll get the center one lined up and started screwed in, and then we can do the rest of them. Just getting each one of these very loosely started, and then in the instructions there it has very specific instructions on the order that it wants us to tighten these down. So the center one first, and then the ones along the centers of the edges, and then the four corners last. And we'll go around the entire bed a couple of times and increase the tightness as we go, to try to make sure that we got nice even tightness on all the screws. So that the bed can be as level as possible. All right, that's looking good. Now we have our top cover for this little area back here. I'm going to turn this whole assembly around just so it's oriented the same way as the instructions. And I think we need to do a little bit of cable management before we put this cover on. So they want me to take the LED cable, which is this thicker black one here, and run it up through this rectangular hole right there. And then we can put this, which is the thermistor for the heat bed, into this little opening here, route it around and out this way, and then do the same thing with our LED cable. So it goes around like that. And then our power cables do the same thing, like that. And then I believe we can put the lid, or put the cover on. I guess not. First, they want us to get this little fabric wrap and get it started around these cords. Just like that. And then we can put a little bit of the end of it into here when we close this up. I think that's the idea. Yeah, that looks right. I'm going to actually turn this whole thing so that the seam is toward the bottom. I don't know that it matters, but aesthetically, I think it'll look a little bit better that way. And then we can cover this thing up and use two M3x10s, I believe. Yes, to hold this whole thing together. Just like so. All right, that looks good, and then we can wrap the rest of our wires through the rest of this cable sleeve. All right, so there's our heat bed assembly complete. We need to mount it on the printer now, I'm pretty sure, and so let me go get the printer, and we'll do that. Right, so there's our printer. And what they want us to do is to place this back here, it looks like. I'm going to push these wires over here out of the way as best I can. Okay. And then we're supposed to gently lower our heat bed assembly here over the 3 Z-rods. Just like so. They want this wire to be exiting under the bed. So I should have obviously done that a little differently. Let me do that. There we go. Now it's under the bed. I think that it matters that this spacer that we put in the back here has its holes lined up with these holes here that I see in the carriage here. So I'm gonna, before that gets messed up, I'm gonna reach under here with a screwdriver and just kind of push this so that I can see that those holes are lined up correctly. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. Yeah, so it says the heat bed cable should go under the heat bed and behind the motor, which it is doing. And so now we can take one of these trapezoidal nuts and thread it down here on the back one, all the way down. And then I assume we screw it down with these 2 side holes and it'll go into that spacer. Then they want us to do the same thing with the front right and then the front left. All right, so we've done all of those, looking good. Then they want us to take the cables and we're gonna run them through, I guess, that hole right there. They say to do the LED first, probably just because the plug is bigger. And then the thermistor. And then the 2 power cables. And we want to push this through all the way so that there's a little bit of the sleeve sticking out the back side. And then they want us to use these 2 little slots here that you may or may not be able to actually see. And we run a zip tie through there and over the top of this cable and then back. So that way I can pull this cable down nice and tight against the wall like that and cinch it down with the zip tie from behind. And now let me turn the printer around if possible. I'll just turn the whole desk mat around. Actually, this desk mat has turned out to be a really useful thing when dealing with this printer up on this desk because I don't have a ton of space, you probably noticed. And it's a bit hard and unwieldy to move this thing around. So just being able to slide it around on the desk mat here so that I can get the right camera angles for you guys has been actually quite useful. All right, so now we're looking at the back of the printer again. And we've got these wires. They want us to grab the LED one first, which is this one right here. They want it to come across and then down through this hole here. And it plugs into the far right connector at the top of our expansion board over here. And then they want all 3 of these other cables also through that same hole. Then we have 2 terminal screws. They want me to attach the heat bed cables to these 2 terminals there. The red positive is the one on my right. Looks good. And here's our thermistor wire. And it plugs into this spot right here, right next to those. All right, and now we're done with this section of the instructions. I've got my bag still of the Haribo bears, and it says I get to eat 6 of them this time. So I'm gonna count out 6 of these, and I'm gonna take a little break, but I'm not done for today. My plan is to come back and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. Still following the rules. So we're going to come back and do the next section, which there on the instructions it says is the CoreXY assembly. I'm going to do that later today for me, but it'll be hopefully in this same video for you. And yeah, looking forward to that. See you in a bit. All right, I'm back. Got some important work done, had a little bit of lunch, leftover Chinese. It was really good. And now we are on to the CoreXY assembly. And so let's get to it. We're starting with these parts here, which it's calling the rod holders. Looks like we're starting some screws in here, but not tightening them down yet. And then same deal with these guys right here. So this big piece of metal here is our CoreXY sort of gantry piece that all of the CoreXY system gets attached onto. And I've oriented it the way that they want me to in the instructions. And so we get to begin by placing these guys. This one's on this side and this one's on this side. And we're going to put this one here and secure it down with 2 screws into, looks like those 2 places right there. Other one goes on the other side. All right, up next, I guess we're setting those aside for the moment. I don't think we need them just yet. We've got these 2 parts here. These are printed parts. And they each get a pulley in there and an M3 by 18 screw down through here. That's turning very nicely. And then we flip it over and we put another one here, it looks like. Same deal, screwing down through here and into the printed part on the other side. All right, now we've got this metal part here. We're supposed to orient it this direction and then put one of these on here like this. Right, and then we flip this around this way. We get one of these new special linear bearings that came with the Core1 kit. And we're using, I guess, these M3 by 8s here, 4 of them, to screw this in from the back side. Now, I didn't get any instructions to lubricate these bearings at all, which I guess makes sense. I assume that they come pre-lubricated. All right, and then I assume we do the same thing, just sort of mirrored, with this bracket here and the other linear bearing. All right, now it says this one goes on this side and this one goes on this side. And I'm supposed to lift this up and put these in here, but I do not see how they attach or connect or anything yet. Oh, I see. We're about to do that with some rods. So these came from the old printer that we disassembled. We've got 2 different sizes. I think we're using these thicker ones for now. We're putting them in these little holders here. The end is supposed to be flush with the part, so I'm going to stand it up this way on the desk to ensure that it's flush, and then go ahead and tighten this down. All right, now it wants me to push this through this linear bearing, at least enough to hold it in place there, and then we'll do the other one over here. And yes, these bearings were definitely pre-lubricated because the rod, I touched the rod on this side that came out as we pushed it through, and there's definitely some grease on that rod. All right, so it wants me to push these all the way in so that the end of the rod out here is flush with the end of this part where my finger is. All right, that looks good. And I assume that that will mean some holes line up over here on this end for this piece to screw down into, and it does. I'm gonna go ahead and probably turn this around to give myself a little bit better leverage here as I press this in. It is a little bit tough to push this in here. It requires a bit of force, but also, obviously, I'm being quite careful because I don't want to push it too far and then have to pull it back or anything like that. All right, that seems good. And I can see that those holes line up as well. I'm not screwing them in yet. And now I am. So they want me to loosen these just a touch. Maybe I shouldn't have tightened them all the way down. That way I can screw these down into here, into the pre-threaded holes in the metal here, and then we'll tighten up the holder on the rod again once we're sure everything is perfectly lined up. That looks good. And then it does say also that I can tighten this back corner as well to hold this rod in place on the back corner here. It's the back corner for me as I'm looking at this assembly, but I'm pretty sure it's actually the front corner of the printer. All right, now we've got that motion there. All right, up next, I'm going to set this kind of off to the side here while we work on some of these additional parts that have to mount onto that gantry. So we're starting with this fancy little tool that they gave us. We used it for something else a while back, but this is new. We snap these two pulleys into here. And let's make sure I'm looking at the correct one of these two. They're mirror images of each other. And what they want me to do is lower this tool down into here. I guess it holds these pulleys in place while I insert an M3x30 screw in this hole right here. That way it goes through the pulleys, and then I screw it in on the opposite side here, tighten it down like so, and then we pop the tool out. And there probably should have been some kind of spacer in between there. I didn't read the instructions. The spacer is sitting right here. It's what I need. I didn't put it in there. So let's undo that and fix it. I'll even go back to the step. There it is, where it shows putting this in here and then putting the spacer right there and then putting this one there. All right, so let's do it for real this time. Then we put one more of these pulleys in here, and we use an M3x18 down from the top here to hold that one in place. All right, and then it wants us to put one of these square nuts into this slot right here. Now we do the same thing with this other motor mount. I'm just going to repeat that again. I'm not going to forget this time to put the little spacer in between. All right, setting those aside, and we have these two pieces here, which are our belt tensioners. We're going to start with this one. So this slides in here like so. And we put an M3x30 down through the top. I need to put a square nut in here. I was just looking back to see if I skipped that step in the instructions. I did. I was like, they didn't tell me to do that. Yeah, they did. And of course, we don't need to tighten this all the way down. We just need to enough turns here to grab that nut that we put in there. And I assume we do the same thing on the other side. They also, on this one here, want me to put this M3x12 screw through here. Tighten slightly. 5 turns are enough. It must not protrude to the other side. Okay. And then we grab one of these and an M3x18 again, and we run this through here. All right, so now we get to bring back our assembly here, our big piece. And we're working in this corner down here. We're gonna put this up underneath here. And then once I got that lined up, it kind of dropped into place. There's a cutout in the metal on the underside of this that it fits into. Then it looks like it's just one M3x6 screw down through the top here. At least for now. Then we do the same thing on the other side here. I'll see if I can show you here on the camera. This printed part has a little rectangular bump right here where my finger is. And this thing presses up into a rectangular cutout in the underside of this metal piece here. Just like that. So that's actually what aligns it. All right, now we can flip this whole thing over. And we're looking at these corners, which are our front corners. And we're going to install these belt tensioner parts. Looks like 1, 2, 3 holes right here line up with the holes in these. In our other front corner here, we've got this guy. Same deal, just lines up with these 3 places, and for whatever reason, this one has different geometry, so it uses M3x30s for all 3 of its holes. It doesn't have that like sloped down side that the other one had. So there's our assembly so far. All right, up next we have the X rail, and this came out of the package with a ton of packing grease on it. It is quite slimy. So I'm gonna just wipe it down a touch here, which I think, yeah, the instructions are telling me to do that anyway. All right, that's a lot better. Clean my hands off too. All right, and they give us this metal piece here, which acts as a backing for our rail. All right, we're using these M3x6s, and they want us to begin with the 3rd hole here and attach this down into our backing rail there, not tightening it down all the way. All right, nice. So now they want us to move these little stopper ends, of course being careful to not let the carriage come off of the rail. So you pinch that together and move that, and they want me to put them 4 holes in, so up here, I guess. I'm going to take that opportunity to wipe a little bit more grease off where those stoppers were at. There we go. All right, now we're doing 2 screws in these 2 holes, and then the final 2 in these outermost holes here. It says tighten just slightly for all of these, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, now we are going to take, I'm going to move some of these parts we're going to need in the future out of the way. We're going to take our assembly here. I'm going to turn it around so it's oriented the same as in the pictures and the instructions, like this. And then we are going to mount this onto here with 3 screws on each side. So these little metal brackets here have 3 screw holes. And I think we're using these screws here. I'm just going to get a couple of these started, like one on either side here to hold this all in place. Now we can put the other screws in and tighten everything down. I gotta say, having built a couple of CoreXY gantries for Voron printers in the past, this whole like all metal assembly here with this one seems really good. Like it's really solid. Hopefully it's square. I think I've read stories of people with Core 1s reporting that their gantry isn't perfectly square, which I guess you can try to just bend the metal a little bit if it turns out to not be square, but I can see where the idea, the intent of the design seems good to me, that it's with this all metal construction and a piece across, like it's a complete square, right? As opposed to most of the Voron CoreXY stuff I built, which is built out of extrusions and has one side, one of the four sides is open, becomes a little bit harder to make sure that you tighten it down and get it perfectly square. So I can see the benefit here. In practice, I guess we'll see with my particular version of the Core 1 here that I end up building, whether the gantry is going to be square or not. But that looks good and solid. I assume now I can take these, yeah, it tells me I can take these little clips off because there's no way this is riding off of the sides of the rail anymore. Just kind of checking out the motion. Seems good. All right, up next, they have this thing that they are calling the bed stop. It needs some square nuts pressed in to here and here. Now we're looking for this little triangular thing here on the back, and we're putting this underneath like this. 3 holes line up with these 3 holes here in the metal parts, and we are screwing it down with these 3 screws right here. Setting this aside for just a second, we've got some motors to prepare. So these are the X and Y motors off of our original Mark 4S, and they're labeled here. So this is the Y axis in my right hand. The X is here in my left hand. And I think we're working on the X one first. So that is this one here. And then we're going to set this pulley on here. And we're going to use this same tool we've been using before. We're going to use it here. They want to use this end of it as like a spacer here. So we put this like so, and we push it all the way down against there and use that as our spacer. Lining up one of our grub screws here with the flat side of the shaft. And we'll go ahead and tighten this down. Cool. Just using the tool again to double check the spacing. Seems good. So then our other motor, same kind of deal. This one goes on this way. We'll go ahead and use our spacer tool here to make sure we get it the right height. That looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and tighten this down. All right, so 2 motors are ready. This right here is the bracket that's going to go on the X-axis that the neck extruder tool head is going to mount onto eventually. And we have our 2 belts. So I believe it is now time to run the belts on this printer. This will be interesting to see how different or similar it is to the Voron printers that I've built in the past. Looks like the concept is similar, but I fully expect, since I have not done this exact thing on this exact printer before, I expect it to be possibly a little bit tricky. So what they want me to do to start with, and I'll try to get this on camera for you, is we're going to use the Y motor. And they want me to make a loop with the belt, put this in here between these 2 pulleys, and so that the loop is in this hole right here. And then I think we're going to insert the motor down right over top of it, and then grab the pulley, which I think we have done. Yeah, and then we've got to screw this in from the other side. So they want me to lift this up. Switch cameras for you guys. I'll fix the zoom for you guys. There. Now we can see, sort of. And we've got, it looks like 3, 4, all 4 holes to screw in here, all the way through the part and into our motor. All right, we're tightened down. I'm putting this back down like it was. And now we've got to run this belt. So, jump back to the top view for you guys here. So we're taking this end of the belt, we're running it around this pulley here. And that way, right? Make sure so I can pull on this and I can see that I'm engaging the motor because I can see the thing turning right there. So that's good news. Then they want me to take it around the idler up here where the belt tensioner is and back this way, right? And then we're going around this pulley right here and in that way. So that is kind of the first half of this belt. And at this point, we can begin attaching to this. They want me to come in here, back out through here, just 4 to 5 teeth extra here. So something like that. We'll leave that sitting there. On the other end, move this so you guys can see. So we've got this one here. It's going to come out around to the opposite corner through there. Like so. It's going to come around this idler here, like so, and back over here to the middle. So now we've got this end over here as well. And they want me to push this in through the center and again pull about 4 or 5 teeth back through there. Now I assume we're doing the same thing on the other side for the other motor. Right, so we make our loop, we put it up through here so we can see the loop through there. We drop our X motor down like so. We pull to make sure we've grabbed it. This is easier to do the second time. Tipping it up and then screwing down the motor. Same thing, right? Just opposite. So we take this end, we run it through this way. Tight. I'm going to check the motor motion again just to make sure we've grabbed the pulley. We have. So once again, we're going around the idler at the front. Go across the back of the printer. All right, I am now going to pull this so that I've got the exact same number of teeth on both belts here and on both belts here on the other side as well. The idea being that assuming that the belts were started out the same length, and I'm not sure that they did, but when I've built my Voron printers in the past, I've always cut the 2 belts to be exactly the same length, and I think the Voron manual tells you to do that. In any case, if you do that, if you assume that the belts have started out the same length as one another, and then you make sure that the same number of teeth are visible on either side here when you pull this thing tight, then you've sort of automatically evened out the tension between the 2 belts even before you start to use your tensioners that you have in the system, of course, right? So this is I think, a good way to just sort of know that you're starting out with a baseline tension that's close to equal between your 2 belts. And then, of course, you'll adjust it from there. All right, so just making sure that everything is still seated on all of the different pulleys. Looks good to me. So we're attaching this guy to the linear rail. Let me turn this around so I can see it. Here, we'll get you guys this shot so you can see it too from the front. So there are holes here, 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 and here that line up with the holes in the rail in the carriage. So we should be able to just tighten this straight down onto there. I guess with that secured in place now, we can really check the motion to make sure everything looks good. And it does. The belts are loose, but of course I have the tensioners almost as loose as they can possibly be. So I'm not concerned about that. We'll adjust the tension on those later on. All right, so now back on this corner here, they want us to run this wire down through this little channel. And then we can tie it in place here. Same thing on the other side, I bet. Yes. All right, now back around on this side. Not sure why they keep having me turn this thing around. But there is a space here for a M3 square nut to slide in. Just like so. And then we're supposed to take this little printed part here and screw it in this way. All right, I think we are on the home stretch for this section of the build. I've got an LED strip here, which we are supposed to attach onto here. And the side here with the rectangular cutout is important. So we want the wire coming off of the LED strip to be facing that direction. They want me to look at this from here with the new cable coming off to my left. And we're going to put this up underneath here. And it secures with 2 screws here on the side. So they want me to flip this back over, rest it on the motors, and grab some zip ties. I assume this cable is going to go through there. They haven't told me to do that yet, but I'm going to go ahead and just thread it through here to kind of hold it out of the way. All right, now we're flipping this back over. We're looking at this front corner here with this angled bit, which I mentioned earlier. I wasn't quite sure what it was for. It is for this little switch sensor, which is going to be our door sensor, it sounds like. So this screws in just with a single screw into a hole in this slanted bit here. Then it says tighten it fully and then loosen it a quarter turn because the sensor needs to be able to move. So this does pivot a little bit back and forth there. And then I'm supposed to tighten this in here the rest of the way so that it touches the sensor. I don't know if you can see it right there. It's coming out through there and it needs to touch. It is not quite yet. All right, now it's touching. All right, now I'm running this wire. And now they want me to flip this over again. They want me to grab a box from the kit just to set under this side over here so that way everything's sitting level. And then they want to route this cable through these zip ties along with this other one. All right, so now I have 3 wires coming off of the back corner here of the gantry and then one on the other side for the other motor. All right, here's our printer. We've got these 2 rods which go here on the corners. So it says to carefully insert this down through here. And there is a piece, a plastic printed piece that this will seat into, right? So I press that all the way down there. Same thing on the other side. And then we are going to carefully set this down on top of here. Okay, the back rod went through this little holder right there. This rod here is obviously meant to go in there. Get the one lined up on the other side as well. I'm going to push these down until they're seated. Just making sure none of these wires are trapped or pinched or anything. They seem good. So we can go ahead and tighten these two screws on the corners here, which will tighten down on top onto these two rods. All right. Now it wants me to tighten down the linear rail. This is interesting. It wants me to push down on the linear rail. So it wants me to push this down and then tighten these screws in the order that they suggested, which is this end first and then the other end, and then alternating back and forth as we move toward the middle here. Yeah, and I can move this forward and back without the without the carriage that the tool head is going to mount onto. It doesn't move side to side really at all. So that's, I think, a good indication that everything is square and even. All right, so now we've got some more fun cable management to do. And this is mostly going to be back here on the back side of the printer. It's going to be hard for me to film this. So you know what? I'm going to follow the rest of these instructions. I'll show them to you on screen here. It's just a matter of routing cables and plugging them all in to the electronics compartment to the right spots, and then eating some gummies, even more of the gummy bears. This time it looks like 7. So yeah, that's probably just a reward because this was a fairly long and complicated step. However, the printer itself is looking really, really good. The overhead view on the camera, yeah, you can't really see much because it's looking right down through the bed. But here you can kind of see, here's the, our CoreXY system up here is looking good. Everything's square and straight and good. I guess we'll find out when we finally print with this thing how square it really is, but it looks good. It looks solid. I'm going to finish these like 2 or 3 pages. I promise I will eat the gummy bears when I'm done, and that'll wrap up this episode, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one.